Thank you for being here this morning. Before we begin, we'd like to thank the board and the weekend to see our presentation. We'd also like to thank Dr. Bell for giving us the knowledge to get through this class and actually getting our projects done helped out a lot. Also, we'd like to thank our family. Without their support, past 3 months wouldn't be possible to get through it. So to begin, I'd like to introduce product technology. My name is Paul Glesney. To my right is Leah and Brandon Present. Said that correctly. Practice that 5 times. And we have Brandon Bishop. And to start off with, at some point in our lives, people have to move from one residence to another. It could be across town, across states, or even across country. But the issue is that, or some of the reasons that we do move is because you might have a new job that requires you to transfer out of state, or you might have a new family that's simply outgrown its home and needs to move into a bigger residence, or you just might be a first-time home buyer. Now, the problem that we've seen is that time in finding that location. When you're purchasing a property, people want to know what the neighborhood is like. They want to know where's the nearest schools, where's the nearest grocery store. And we found that technology that takes a lot of time. Countless hours can be spent just researching just a couple of those questions, and by the time you get finished with that, maybe the house is already sold. We're not sure, but go on to. Sorry. So at Bob Technology, we took an email poll of our friends and family, and we received about 200 responses. Sorry, I'm too far. Let me step back for a second. There's an important, one important step is time, and what we wanted to do was produce that time for us. We asked our friends and family a simple email question, and it was, what are the top 5 responses, or what are the top 5 criteria that you look for in a community? And we wanted answers that were geared more towards the neighborhood, and not more towards the residents. It's like square footage or rent or anything like that. Usually those answers you can find on the MLS listing or from the property manager. And then out of the results, we developed 5 categories. And you see up there we have schools, we have crimes, we have community, interest, and shopping. Now down here you'll notice that we have miscellaneous. Miscellaneous, those were groupings, or those were answers, valid answers that we received, but we couldn't really quantify them, or we couldn't put them in a category with the other group. And also, not on this list, we had to throw out some of the answers that we received as well. They were just geared towards residents. People wanted to know, like HOA fees, or they wanted to know other information regarding the residents. And at this time, I'd like to turn time over to Leah and to continue the presentation.
Hi, my name is Leah Opatowski. Thanks for being here. So with that background in mind, knowing that there are multiple items that you're going to want to store for when you want to move or relocate, we looked at the current process. And the current process is pretty much internet search driven. Most people are going to go to the web and source their information. Well, part of that is what websites, first of all, you have to source which websites are going to be important to you. And then from those, once you figure out which websites you want to source, you need to actually source the information from the website. From there, you need to gather it, and you're going to compile it for use for each resident that you're looking for. So what we decided is, hey, why don't we just cut to the quick, and we're just going to create a single source platform where you can sort this information from. So the boss check solution is we went with the Android device. Plus, the main thing and the reason we chose Android is we wanted the mobility factor for when people are actually going to open houses. You want to have that mobility and accessibility of that data as you're at the house. It makes it a little bit easier, or if you're just going through a neighborhood and you see a for rent sign, it'd be very accessible for the user to obtain that information right there. Additionally, let's look up Android, because it's Android versus iPhone, and kind of how the app market's going. And when we looked it up, this is just an indicator of the smartphone sales. It's not an indicator of market share exactly, but this is a pretty good indicator in that there's a large consumer base with which is growing. So at the end of Q1 2012, which is this year, the share of the market, the smartphone sales was 61% of the Android base. So with that knowledge, we were thinking, hey, we have a built-in consumer base. Doesn't get better than that. So we already have users that actually have the platform ready and are already versed in how it's used. So that drastically reduces any training that will be needed. Plus the marketability is very easy in the app market. Pop it on the app market, free data, or you can pay for it. And we did a little research on the apps that are currently out there. There's actually no single source platform that offers the 5 categories that we have. Some have 2, some have maybe 3, but some of them are differing. So this is actually a unique product. And again, one of the best part about having the app and the mobility is that you can actually achieve real-time results as you're going to the open houses. So where to start? We got down to like high-level concepts. In general, Android devices are touchscreen driven, so we're going to employ that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to build a GUI, and we're going to put our 5 categories, which you can select, so the user will be able to have. From your device screen, you're going to load your app, and from the app, you're going to have a menu with which you can choose shopping, interesting points of interest, information about crime, or commuting or transportation information. You're just going to select it. You're going to have event handler. The menu will actually obtain the location data either based on GPS pics of your phone. Geolocation of GPS isn't available, and then user input. You can actually manually override GPS, which is the primary default. And then from there, you're going to source the internet content, and then you're going to send the search criteria depending upon which one you choose, along with your location data. And then you're going to go and source the internet, and then the requested data will come back and will be displayed for the user on the GUI. So our top level activity, when you want to look at the flow of the program, user's going to go into our GUI. This is a very generic, not so pretty design, but it gets the point across. This is where we started. Let's just get it on paper. This is what we're going to have at our office. So you're just going to enter into a main menu. From this main menu, the user location is going to be triggered. By default, it's going to be GPS. There's going to be an option in the main menu with which the user can override GPS and enter in a manual location. Let's say you're sitting at home on your PC, you see a listing, and you just want to enter it in there. That's available as well. Then the determination, there's a decision whether location is good or not, whether the information that the user entered is valid or the GPS fix is valid. Then we'll go into the sub-function menu, which is where you're going to have, this is like an example of what you'll have for a tool. And so from there, the user will enter in the search criteria. When I say to enter in the search criteria, they'll actually hit a button that's got options for them, or there's going to be a field with which they can enter in their search criteria manually if they prefer. And then the search criteria will be sent to the internet. We'll receive the search results, and then we're actually going to display the results. And ours is currently on a map. So the heart of the program on any Android device is going to be your GUI. So, and we wanted to spend a little bit of time making sure that what we offer is going to be highly intuitive, meaning that it goes along with a lot of the social norms that a lot of applications have now, button-driven, menu-driven, obviously touchscreen with the use of any device button. We have a multi-page interface. Now it starts at the main, and you can select from there. It will have its own page for each one of the options for school, time, points of interest, etc. And again, it's option-driven, so that it takes away some of the frustration for any of the users, and that you can't really get yourself into a math, and it helps reduce any possible error as well when flowing through the program. And naturally, you want to make it look good, so we spent some time making sure that it's going to have some aesthetic appeal in the marketplace, and we invested some time on making sure that the artwork was and the graphics are going to be appealing to make it a little bit more marketable. So now taking a look and going a little bit deeper into it, I'm going to introduce Brandon Bishop.
My name's Brandon Bishop. I did most of the software development for this program. So first of all, being that it's an Android device, it's going to be using Java. Sam will appreciate that, I'm sure. But that's just we're using Java because that's just what you have to use for Android. That's the language it uses. But being Java, we're able to implement a modular design, which will allow us to add and subtract functionality very easily. Say, for example, the application goes to market and people just absolutely hate this specific feature. I can just yank it out and throw something else in there. It's very easy. We tried to implement a lot of code reuse, partially for the same reason. As being modular, it'll allow us to do some code reuse, but also it helps to keep things nice and neat. For example, typically if there's a problem with our code reuse, the problem will show itself in several places, and then we'll be able to fix it in one place. That actually happens to me quite a lot, and was able to fix it eventually. And then for the GUI design, we use mostly XML. There are a few things that were done in code just because of certain APIs, which I'll get into later. The way that API forces you to use it, we had to implement certain things in code instead of an XML. The nice thing about the XML is when you're using the Eclipse development environment for Android, it allows you to get a nice, good preview of what every screen is going to look like. And you can just write that on the fly very easily, move stuff around, and just make it look right and make sure everything's going to fit on the screen. We had to use a few external sources. The biggest one is the Google Maps API. The Google Maps API basically just put the map on the screen. That's one of the problems we actually ran into. One of our risks were not being familiar with the software and not being familiar with all the APIs per se. And Google Maps API did a whole lot less than we thought. So really what it comes down to is it allows you to put a map in your application instead of calling up another application for maps. And it helps us keep a specific look and feel throughout our application so that it feels like you're in there the whole time. The next one we use is the Google Places API, which actually implemented a lot of the things we thought Google Maps was going to do. Basically, the Google Places API allows you to populate a URL with search criteria, and then there's also type criteria, so you can narrow your search results. So, for example, if you search for boxing, who knows what you're going to get? You might get information about arenas for boxing matches to watch boxing. But if you wanted to go to a boxing school, it'll allow you to put in a type called school, and then it, in theory, will narrow your results to schools that have to do with boxing. This is all based upon data that Google has, so our results are only as good as what Google gives us. And then the Google Places API will return the data in a JSON package. You could choose JSON or XML. We chose JSON because it's a little bit lighter weight, and there's already built-in APIs in Android and Java that allow you to parse it very easily. This is a basic diagram of the different classes. This diagram is really to mostly show the inheritance of the different classes in the program. There's a couple of classes that we use that aren't up here because they're more related to just the data. They're not really related to how the actual application is running. But basically, we start up here at the top. Local lowdown is our main activity. And from there, we have a subclass called settings, which just launches a little dialog that allows the user to select whether or not they want to use GPS or a manual input. And it also gives a background information about the application. From there, we have the mapping and the parse classes, and those, they're not virtual classes, but they might as well be. We never instantiate those, they can just be kind of there, and I'll get back into those later. But the real meat of the program, what the operator is going to see, is at this level here. So we have different class for shopping, school, points of interest, crime, and commuting. That's what we use right now. And like I said, with our modularity, if it turns out that nobody cares about shopping, we can just rip that out and throw something else in there. No problem. And then each one of these has a subclass called search. The reason we went with the separate subclass on each one is a little bit counterintuitive at first, and I didn't want to design it this way. I tried to make a search class that they all inherited from to do the search. But it turns out that by using a subclass here, I can actually make the search run in the background so that it doesn't tie up your GUI, and it'll give a smoother feel to the application if the search is running in the background instead of if it was in its own class up here that it inherited from, the search would actually take over the application and you'd be frozen until it was done. So this is one part where our hope for modularity didn't work as well as we had hoped, but it's not too bad because the code is essentially the same on each one. So the basic flow here is when you select shopping, you'll go into that view, and you will be able to conduct a search criteria, some sort of a search. The search function will send that URL out to the internet, and it will receive a response. And then it'll feed that response to the parse, the methods in the parse object, or the parse class. And it'll take that JSON response, and it will parse all the data out of there that's relevant to what we're actually looking for. And from there, it'll pass that information to the mapping class, and the mapping class will just take that data and put little points on the map and show you where it is. That's a real basic overview of how it works. So really, to get a better idea, I'll just go ahead and show you how it works. So my actual Android device, that's my home screen, and you see our application up top, local lowdown, and that's our main menu right there. The gear up top, their settings menu, and there's a little bit of information about it, developed by Boz Technologies. The artwork was created by Hillary Emerson Lay. We actually just found her online, and we got her permission to use her artwork for the application. She was actually quite excited about it. So. Sorry about that. And so if you want to use current location, it comes default is checked. But if you uncheck it, it'll allow you to put in an address and say Sam's house.
92127. No, 90210.
So we'll use the current location. Gives us a good idea of what's around here. One of the biggest results we had with schools, people looking at houses, they want to know what the schools are in the neighborhood. If you have kids, obviously there's a few single people out there that didn't care, but for the most part, schools is important. All right, so we go to schools. There's our house right there. That's like click on the house. You're here. And then we have these buttons here: elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and all schools. I'll go ahead and click on all schools since we're at a school right now. You should see some results here. They're usually quicker.
Yeah.
Now, right now, it has parsed it, it's sending it to your source.
Right now, well, it's actually still kind of connected to the internet.
Are you connected to the Wi-Fi here at the school? Because if you are, you want to disconnect it, and if you didn't,
There's two bars, that's a little better.
there you go. That should work.
Yeah, it might be.
It's room is like
for all
shielded.
schools. There we go. You just click on one right there. National University Library System gives you the address. And then there's the International Programs Office. The reason it's bringing up 3 of these is because if you look where I clicked, there's actually a few results right there. So it couldn't actually tell because my fingers are a bit bigger than these points. We can go down to that one in the lower left, that's Kaplan College, down the street on Balboa. You see another one. Let's look at shopping. One thing we know, there's a lot of car dealerships in the area. So if I do a search, I can search for cars. So here we got some car dealerships, possibly. Motorcycle training. It's not a dealership, but it's related. Like I said, our results are only as good as what Google has. So it was tagged that way. Wow. I don't know why that's ZoomAutos.com, that makes sense. So I'm talking about Mesa. Then it's probably a smog center. Or we can look at the grocery stores in the area.
What's the radius involved? How far is it?
The way I have it implemented is it doesn't really use a radius in this case. What I did was it sorts them by distance. So it gives me 20 results, and they're sorted by distance from the current location. Looks like there aren't any grocery stores in that view. If I zoom out a little bit.
You still have cars down there.
Oh, yeah, I didn't believe it. That's a bug thing, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. If I should change it so that if I push one of the other buttons, it'll clear out anything in the search.
This is really very cool. Keep that there in case you want to tailor, right? The feature does that.
There you go.
Go back.
I'll get there someday. And,
We gotta learn how to do that.
the other one we have working is points of interest. So we say gym. There's not many that are real close. There's Curves in Sierra Santa. There's the boxing club on Convoy. That's it.
Pretty cool.
So,
So the location that you enter would be an address, right? If you
Yeah.
want to, yeah, it's an address and it will go from there.
yeah, you put in an address, and then that function isn't quite working yet. There's a class called geocoder, and apparently it doesn't always run on all phones, so I have to implement it in a different way. I'll probably end up using the Google Places API, because there's a way to put in an address and it'll return the Latin long, and then you can put that on the map. So it's just a matter of re-implementing how it works.
So would you say that just getting done what's in Google Places API was the main kind of time-consuming part of the project? Or not the whole thing?
There was a lot. There's a huge learning curve on it. When we first started, I was envisioning Google Maps API being like Google Maps API, Google Maps.
Yeah.
Same thing, right? Not at all. So it took a lot of research to figure out how to use the Maps API, and then it took a lot of research how to use the Places API, and then I do a lot of research on how to actually parse the data that's returned, how to actually send a request out to the internet. That's something we never actually did in any of our classes. So there were a few things that were a challenge, but research and.
So why didn't you use the browser on the system? Any reason? Did you look into it?
Yes, if you use the browser, it's very easy to use the browser by, they call it an intent, because you can basically launch another one. What happens is it'll actually launch the browser, and then it takes you out of the application.
You can't embed it in your application?
No, yeah, if you try to diffuse an intent, it'll launch the browser and then use that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. This could have been a lot easier if we would have just used an intent to go to Google Maps and then put it on the map. But we kind of felt it was important to have a native feel to it and just keep that feel through the whole thing.
And then I recall reading, in order to integrate your app in Google Market, you have to satisfy a whole bunch of, again, design criteria and so forth. Does your design satisfy those or not? I didn't look into it.
I believe it does.
Yeah, okay. Are you planning to place it in there or not?
At some point, yes. There's a few things we have to do. Right now, my Google Maps, there's a special key you have to get, so I have a development key right now, so it can't be published with that. The Google Places API has another key that you have to use, and that one is also a development key, so it's limited to 1,000 searches every 24 hours. So, 500 people get it, it's not going to last too long. You just have to register with Google, and I think you get a million searches a day or something like that.
Okay.
You mentioned that there was part of the GUI API that you used XML for, and there was another part that you used Java for.
Right.
Could you tell us at what point you needed to kind of go to Java as opposed to?
Okay. So most of the buttons, all the buttons, and the background pictures and the text, that's all done in XML. What happened is, with the Google Maps API, you can only have one map in a particular view. So we couldn't use XML to bring up a map because it would be the same map, and then that's the way I tried to do it actually, and it kept crashing. So the problem is we have to implement it in code for each different view that we actually implement. And that's why there's an entire class for mapping. If it could have been done in XML, then there probably wouldn't even been a class for it.
I'm not very familiar, so you use the class for this class for mapping is individual to each one of those 5 categories, or?
Kind of. They all inherit from it.
Okay.
So you'll, right, they inherit from parts which inherit from mapping, which is part of the inherit from the main activity. And we could have made it all one class, but I think it was just, the code started getting really long in a single class, and then that class started doing a lot of different things. So it just became easier to break it up into a couple of different files, and we tried to make it logical where that split would be.
How many activities do you have?
Yeah, the way it actually works is we had to almost launch it like they were different applications almost for each one. So 6 different activities. They all had to be registered in the Android manifest separately. So there was a whole lot of stuff that was brand new to us on this program.
Leah? Did you get involved in any of the actual coding?
I didn't do the actual coding. I just had backwards conversations with my daughter, badgering and asking him, why didn't you do this and do that? And he's like, that's what I asked. So he did all the coding. We realized early on that by both your guys' responses, when we started to develop the app, it was like, you guys better start coding now. So with the weight of the documentation and the weight of the coding stuff, we didn't want to splice out the coding and then have any inconsistencies in the code. Kind of wanted to avoid that. So Brandon did our coding well.
But then you did follow, you followed what he was doing, though, so you had some.
So that's a fun thing when you're trying to do documentation and you hit the design phase. We had some awesome conversations because what we kept doing then was referring to code that was existent and not designing it from the front end. So we ran into quite a few glitches, because then what you do is you start rabbit holing, and then you get really into it, and when your code all the way down to like the variable name, we're like, whoa. Now we're telling the programmer how to program like specifically down to a variable name, so we had to learn how to keep backing out and try and bird's eye viewing and stepping out of our own code to see what's the right way to do this. So yeah, having to start that code earlier, we had to, but at the same rate, it ended in some conflict, and it kind of hurt us in the long run because then we ended up taking a lot more time on the design portion of it because we had to do that.
Paul, what area and project would you say you kind of specialized in doing most work?
The testing and actually the manual has helped us. Didn't help out coding, but coming up with the plan to actually do testing.
What approach did you take for testing?
Basically, it was a hands-on approach, just a user view. Like, okay, if we press this one, where is it supposed to go? What's it supposed to do? What are the parameters that we require. It's supposed to come up with a map, and then with we had our little icon at the top, we wanted to make sure that you see it there, and then just basically double the detail, making sure that those values show up.
Okay, so you put a lot of stuff in there to try and make sure that you actually tried to break it.
Yes.
Was he successful? Was he successful?
No,
We tried to design it so you couldn't break it. We tried to make it so that
it was user-friendly.
right, and there's less that the user can actually do. That's what we were talking about with the option-driven approach, where the user's not going to be typing stuff in and have to get it in the right format to make sure everything gets formatted correctly to go out. We tried to say, okay, for schools, there's really only a few options. You want to know where the elementary, middle school, high school, and let's just throw in all schools just in case. That way, you push a button and that's it.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? On. Great. All right. Good job.